So if Bitcoin's an information network, it's pretty important to think about how and where that information is stored. Now we know the Bitcoin network is made up of these nodes that are facilitating settlement in Bitcoin, the native currency. But if we want a snapshot of where that Bitcoin is at any one point in time, uh, we need to look at this history. Now, Bitcoin's blockchain enables this process. It's information stored in such a way that is infeasible to alter. And we'll explain why in a little bit. At a very basic level, what is being stored? Well, we're talking about transactions. We're talking about Bitcoin moving from one user to another. And when that happens, there's a few pieces of information that are necessary. We need to know where is the Bitcoin going from? And we need to know that because we need to know that the person who's sending it actually owns that Bitcoin. Is it actually in their account? There has to be a recipient. There is an amount. There is a fee attached to that amount to incentivize miners. And it has to be recorded in such a way that every node on the network can confirm this occurred. And that happens through signatures, cryptographic signatures to be precise. Now, quick side note, Bitcoin doesn't actually have users, okay? It simply has addresses. It's pseudonymous, kind of like email. So when we talk about Bitcoin moving around, we can't actually be sure how many users there are because one user could have many addresses, and many users could control or collaboratively control one address. Earlier in the course, we touched on something called information theory. Now, this is the study of how digital information is stored, verified, recalled, transmitted, which is essential in Bitcoin. And the key piece of that are blocks. Now, blocks, I like to think of them as these data containers that are time-stamped and basically contain the transactions that occurred within a very specific window, on average every 10 minutes of Bitcoin's history. Now, blocks have a limit of how much data they can store. This is a crucial element of Bitcoin's design. Block space is finite, and the only way to pay for it is with Bitcoin, by offering it as a fee to miners to have your transaction included. And as Bitcoin adoption grows and there's more demand for block space, fees naturally increase. But as fees increase, the incentive to innovate also grows, whether that be through batching multiple transactions into one, conducting transactions off-chain altogether, or only settling them or achieving final settlement when it's absolutely required or waiting for fees to reach a certain threshold that you're comfortable with. These blocks of data. Now, if we were going to design a system to make it evident that something was not quite right, well, how would we do that? And the way blocks are linked in Bitcoin is by taking a piece of data from the previous block, including it in the current block. And the previous block, obviously, has a piece of data from their previous block. So that together forms this chain that makes it very obvious if there has been any kind of tampering. Now, the construction, proposal, and addition of new blocks is done by miners, and I'll link an essay below that explains the mechanics of this. But for now, we're going to focus purely on the information that the Bitcoin blockchain is producing, storing, and being recalled by nodes. How can 14 years, though, worth of transactions and blocks being produced at 10-minute intervals be maintained by these thousands of nodes around the world? Wouldn't that be incredibly costly? The average person is not running a data center in their basement. Well, Satoshi Nakamoto used several tools and data structures to achieve a very minimally burdensome design. One of which is a Merkle tree, or a hash tree, invented by Ralph Merkle in the 70s. Basically, we're combining transaction data in pairs, and then combining the resulting data in pairs again, so on and so forth, until we have a single piece of data, and that's where you get this tree structure from. Now, this root hash allows a node to very quickly and easily verify a particular transaction contained in the block, but without having to go down to the actual individual transaction itself, saving a large amount of time. So all of Bitcoin's history currently can fit on a 1 terabyte hard drive. That costs about $50 at the time of recording. Now let's say hypothetically the Bitcoin blockchain grows by an additional terabyte over the next 5 years. Does that mean the cost of running a node is going to increase because of the required storage space, and the barrier to running a node will just increase as well? Well, no, because of something called Moore's Law. We know technology is deflationary when measured in a non-fiat currency, but Moore's Law is basically the observation made by Moore that roughly every 2 years, the number of transistors that can fit on a chip or microprocessor doubles. And if any monetary network is going to be capable of resisting a jurisdiction-specific attack, it has to achieve a certain threshold of decentralization among nodes that makes it infeasible to shut down. So the Bitcoin network benefits from the phenomena of Moore's Law. This is what Moore's Law actually looks like when we look at the history of it, starting in the 70s when it was first proposed. And we can kind of see this is a log chart, so it's exponential growth, obviously, in terms of the transistors that can fit on the same chip. This obviously causes the cost of compute to decrease over time. So when we have a blockchain and blocks added at an incremental rate, it's going to grow in a linear fashion. Because remember, each block has finite space. The cost to run a node, or the components, hardware, required to run a node are only going to decline in price. But they're also going to decline at an exponential rate. And this is even when adjusting for this insane fiat inflation. So nodes will continue to proliferate around the world.